Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. If you've ever longed for knowing the experience of liberating your consciousness from identifying with your mind and body and letting it float in the primordial state of non-causal peace, bliss, love, wonder, and oneness, then one trail you might want to consider following is the one blazed by Dr. Gabriel Cousens. A holistic physician, psychiatrist, family therapist, rabbi, yogi, spiritual mystic, humanitarian, peace ambassador, and best-selling author, Gabriel Cousens MD pursued spiritual liberation through holistic medicine and three great spiritual traditions: Torah Jewish Mysticism, Eastern Yogic way of life, and Native American Sundance traditions. Dr. Gabriel Cousens joins me now to talk about his latest book, Into the Nothing, a spiritual biography, which shares his wild, adventurous journey to spiritual liberation and reveals his teachings of spiritual nutrition and his pathway to the holistic liberation way. Dr. Gabriel Cousens, welcome.
Well, Sandie, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be talking with you. And
Once I met a female editor of a Catholic newspaper who told me that she found God through algebra. In your book, Into the Nothing, you say that all you learn from life has come from meditation, sacred relationship, and playing football. So let's start with football, which I must confess is a little bit easier for me to understand than algebra. So what was it about football?
so what it was is two things. One is, it was the first time in my life of going beyond myself, of getting so intensely involved that I went beyond my mind and began having very deep spiritual experiences. It's different than the zone. It was with so much effort that I kind of went beyond my mind, beyond pain, beyond anything, and felt that a central unity. That's what it was. And it has been that way since I was 10 years old, till I finished football as the captain of the undefeated Amherst College football team.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
It's on my lap. I wasn't taking football as a spiritual experience. It's just what happened.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word pain. I mean, you were in an awful lot of pain throughout your football career. You had a condition with your back that required all sorts of treatment before you could even get on the field. Do you think that the fact that you had that condition and that pain also kind of propelled you into this other place?
Well, the answer is yes. And very early, I learned to transcend pain, to be honest with you. Because there's injuries all the time. You're playing football, there's always injuries. I was already in a sense, injured with that, and wore a back brace while I'm playing football and so forth. And that took me into a little bit more yogic thing, because later I did 2 hernia operations without anesthetic, because I had learned to go so far in my mind that the 5th level of yoga, which we call pratyahara, sense separation, I was doing playing football, just naturally, and then I just learned how to do it, by a focused mind. So yes, it played a role that I had to get beyond that, so I wasn't feeling it in the midst of the field.
I mean, you say
no distraction. I had to be totally there.
Yeah, I do understand that. And I've heard people who have very painful experiences say to me that they can go to a place where they're beyond the pain.
That's it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, from quite an early age, you were drawn like a magnet, weren't you, to explore consciousness, to know God, as you say. Where do you think that inner urging came from?
When I was 1 year old in 1943, I had TB, which at that point was a death sentence. Now, what do you know when you're 1 year old? But what I do know, there's a message. There's what we call meta-communication with my parents. Everybody was very concerned. They didn't send me to a sanitarium. They kept me at home, got really good care. Obviously, I survived. But I had the question, what is this mystery of death? What am I dealing with? I mean, when you're one, what do you know? But I knew something very important. And then I spent the next 33 years of my life exploring that mystery. And God, let's say, put a few things. My brother died when I was 16 from a car accident. He and I were very close. My father died when he was 21. My mother died when I was 33. And then it was about 6 months after that that I met Swami Muktananda and had the awakening of what we call the Kundalini. We call it the Torah Ruach HaKodesh. And I went into the nothing. And when I came down, a little voice rang out and said, there is no death for the self. And it was a direct apperception, a direct experience of that truth. That's how I saw it. That's how it solved me. I'm not sure. But I was searching from the time I was really 1 year old. When I was 4, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know what that meant. When I was 8, I began having visions of spiritual figures in the desert in white, dressed in white. I didn't know what that was. And exactly, most people didn't know what it was either, so I stopped sharing. It was beyond, in the 40s, what people would think you could understand. And including my parents, who were great and were loving, but this was beyond them. But it was very real, and that's how it shifted for me. It was like, and then 1970, I had a vision taking an EST course, the last Werner Erhard course, and I got 3 teachers came to me. It was Sai Baba of Shirdi, he left his body in 1918, didn't know who he was. Abraham, didn't know who he was. And then the Native American teacher, Crazy Horse. So suddenly these beings appeared in a vision. And so I've gotten, from meditation, the answers come. And it's just this subtle voice, and then I've learned to follow that subtle voice. And it's just like, that's what's happening, do it. That's how I feel about it. Now, then.
You certainly did do it, didn't you? I mean, it's been said that your autobiography, it reads like, you had 10 lives there because you packed so much in. I mean, I couldn't even begin to start listing all the different qualifications and areas that you've excelled in because we'd have nothing left to talk about, or no time left to talk about what I want to talk about. But your journey to truth has taken you down so many paths. I mean, psychiatrist, family therapist, holistic medicine practitioner. In 1975, you started studying with Swami Muktananda Paramahansa. You spent quite a long time in India, didn't you? I mean, you've done
7 years. Yeah. With him, yeah.
7 years with him, yeah. And you did, I mean, during that time, it seems like you had a really grueling schedule, 6 hours a day of meditating, mystical visions, traditional Vedic teachings, all kinds of training and study and commitment. That, I mean, where did you find the energy, the motivation to do all of that?
It's a really good question. The truth is, I didn't think about it. I'm being really honest. I didn't think, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get liberated. It was what was happening. It was like I was being carried by this wave of energy. I mean, I do have a lot of energy, but I'm saying something different. I was being carried by this wave. I didn't intend to do any of this. we're in the ashram recommended 1 hour meditation a day, and I'm at 6 hours a day. I asked my friend, "Is that okay?" I mean, I don't know. And of course, he said fine, but it was what I'm saying. I was being pulled in it. I didn't really have a elective choice. I mean, we always have a choice not to cooperate, but the energy was so strong that was really the only thing I could do. So I want to plead a certain amount of innocence, as if I technique my way. It's not what happened. It happened to me. My goal was to show up. That's it.
That's it. Just show up, and the rest happened. You received a Shaktipat energy transference from your guru, which you say that broke through to freeing your consciousness to dissolve into the nothing. And that led to the acknowledgement by two of your spiritual masters that you were liberated. What does it mean to be liberated? What does it feel like?
Well, the truth is, yes, I felt different. And when Swami Prakashananda, who's the enlightened disciple of Muktananda, said, "You're liberated," I didn't believe him. Okay, to be honest. It's like, is this a test? But I was sharing what I was experiencing, and what I was experiencing was the dance of the divine and everything, and knowing that I'm not just a witness of it, but it's unreal and real at the same time. All I had to do was close my eyes, and I was in a deep mystical ecstasy. During the day, I was seeing and experiencing God and everything. So, and that continues. But that was the shift, okay? Symbolically, at noon I would meditate for 2 hours, just on a little balcony. And one day I got up after the 2 hours, and suddenly I could see everything. So there was like a whole difference of perception of the truth. It was like an internal shift, but it manifested as an external experience. So it was, in a sense, life was no longer attachment, and it was non-attachment, but with a great deal of ecstasy. For me, the inner experience is and was, I'm going to say, romantic, intense, passionate ecstasy, but not being attached. But just all life was this ecstasy that I was experiencing, whatever I was doing, and I was seeing the light in all things. I was seeing the spark of God in all things. And it was around that time when they both of them acknowledged me. Again, I didn't ask to be acknowledged; they acknowledged me. So that's kind of it. There's just as if, well, I describe it, the glass ceiling of the mind shatters, and you're at one. But I do want to qualify something, and it's something Prakashananda also pointed out to me when he kind of explained what all this means, is that it doesn't mean you're 100%. It means you're in that consciousness more than not, and then it slowly grows ever deeper, if that makes sense. So my experience today is different even then, where I went from 45% to 55%, 60%, and it just keeps expanding because it's just a way of being. That's kind of what I'm saying. It's not like all or none, suddenly you're God merged. No, well, you experienced God merged a lot, but you're not 100% God merged. That happens to very few people. Muktananda himself wasn't God merged. His guru was, or Sai Baba Shruti. They were in the state all the time, but they were, let's say, much deeper into the state, 80%, 90% in the process, whereas I was at that stage just entering into that awareness where I crossed over into this other illuminated reality. Indian terms I'll call it illuminated Maya. It wasn't Maya. as if it's bad and negative. It's like, no, the dance of the world is incredible.
You were empowered by Muktananda to give Shaktipat, which is energy to awaken the Kundalini to those seeking awakening. And you've said that, to your surprise, that you do this over the internet. You do it in your teachings, and you even are doing it through this book. I'm curious to know. I mean, somebody surely has to. They couldn't just pick up your book and receive a transmission unless they were ready for it. Is that correct?
Okay, the answer is yes, they have to be ready. 2, they can't just pick up the book and it can happen. It's happened with my other books. My very first book in 1986, Spiritual Nutrition and the Rainbow Diet, it happened a lot, and it happens a lot with this book. And I don't know exactly the principle of it, to be honest with you, but there's a certain energy that comes forth from my eyes in the book. That's the way I would put it. But it is something that does happen. I'm not unique in that. I know that happened with people looking at Muktananda's books. The play of consciousness that happened with. So I'm not alone in this, but it is something that regularly happens for people.
You then, I mean, you've what's the word? You've kind of experienced liberation through 3 different paths of teaching, if not more. I mean, certainly there was your the work, you study, the training that you did in India with Muktananda. You also spent many years looking at, the Torah was another one. You became a rabbi. Specifically for you, the Kabbalistic and Essene teachings that are the most mystical aspects of Judaism.
I'm actually a genetic Levi. I have 37 Levi genes.
Okay. And then you also took the path towards the Native American tradition. So there, in that vision that you had of 3 different teachers, there they all are, aren't they? Abraham, the Torah, you've got the, Native American. How challenging was it? The sun dancer, the eagle dancer, I mean, they're extreme trials of initiation, aren't they?
Well, if I told you I had a good time, you just have to see me. I actually love that stuff. And I was the only one out of regularly 60, 70 people doing the Sundance who went the 4 days without food and water and, the full, complete ceremony. The eagle dance, you're what we call pierced. They put the hooks in your chest for the whole time. And the other dances is just for one dance. And 1 hour or 2 of the dance. And there was a point when I was the only one on the field. It was very hot. There were 18 eagle dancers. I was the only one that didn't ever leave the field. And being a doctor, I knew to take an enema before. So I was clean. I didn't have to go to the bathroom. Little things like that make a difference. So you have the hooks in your chest the whole time. And I'm the only one. And Cam, my Sundance leader, he gets the drummers going. And this is day 3, no food, no water, standing for 12 from sunrise to sunset. And I just start dancing, and the drummers going, and it's just communication going. And I'm going to places that are just beyond. And that something happened. I seemed to get stronger after that. Now, 4 days, you're sleeping on the ground. And I was so filled with energy by the 4th day that they claim I did a backflip. I don't think I did, but I did at least a back somersault in breaking, because at the end you break, the hooks you have to lurch back, and it you bleed a little bit. Obviously the hooks come out of your chest. You don't take them out, they come out. But the point I'm making is, it was very easy to go into ecstatic states beyond the body. That's the point I'm trying to say. And that's what happened for me. And one of the Sundance brothers said, yeah, you're really in your element. So I have to tell you, I had a good time. I was not suffering.
So, These three traditions, I'm curious to know what commonalities there were, or what were the most important things that you personally found in each one of them?
That's a very interesting question. So the commonality is going beyond yourself, going beyond identification with your ego, going beyond identification with your body. Is to do what happened, you couldn't be identified with your body. Going beyond identification with pain, so we have all 8-limb yoga, the Pratyahara would be the 5th, but you go into samadhi in all of those, different ways, but in all of those. So those are certain common strengths. Now, the Native American was a little bit more with spiritual courage. I also did the ghost dance for 11 years. I actually ran it because I became empowered. I came to run sweat lodges and ipis, and we did the ghost dance, which we called the spirit dance. And in football, same thing, going beyond. In the meditation with Madonna, going beyond. And in the Jewish tradition, again, meditating until there's nothing left. Now, deep in the Jewish tradition, we have Abraham, and I took an initiation in Israel on my own thing, where I spent 3 days in the desert without food and water. I have to tell you, people spend a day and they can die. Okay, that does happen. And on the second day, I had a little fire. I was in a semi-cave, a little fire at night. And there was a vision of Abraham that appeared. And he transmitted the spiritual energy of the gates, all 4 areas, corners of the tent being open, and spiritual warriorship, because he was a warrior. But the point is, he physically materialized as Sai Baba Shirdi did in front of me in Prakashananda. And so there was an energy transmission. So in each one of these, there was some sort of energy transmission. There was going beyond the mind. You have to be able to go your mind to do what I'm talking about. There's no other way to go about it. And there was discipline involved. These are all kind of pieces. And in the process of going beyond the mind is meditating. The Abraham meditated in the fields of Mamre, and Yitzhak was meditated in the grasses in the field. So that was a big part. It just doesn't get tuned into by most people, but that's kind of a mystical shamanic tradition. Native American, obviously, a lot of shamanic tradition involved. That you're playing with the transcendence into kind of the other planes as is just part of what happens. And that's true, obviously, in yoga, but it's also very, very true in the Torah tradition. Is a deep shamanic, mystical tradition. And so these are what are in common. How they're different, I would say that the Torah tradition is a little bit more intellectual. The Native American is more focused on more physical, spiritual courage. The yoga is kind of a mix in between with a lot more and meditation. So there's a lot more common parts to it than not. And then there were teachers that emerged for me in each of the traditions that were symbols of the kind of deeper awareness. And so I was getting supported in that way. Now, I'll say one more thing. In the yogic tradition, I had many, many, many visions and direct experiences with the minor gods and goddesses who dwell in the astral plane. I had no idea this was possible. But for example, one day meditating in the morning doing the fire ceremony, the goddess Lakshmi appeared, just like she looked like in the books. And she walked towards me and merged with me. And she transmitted, like Abraham transmitted, she transmitted these profound feminine liberated energies. So in the traditions there is actually a physical transformation. Whereas Abraham transmitted energies, Lakshmi transmitted the whole, in a sense, feminine liberated awareness. I wasn't planning on this, but this is what really happened, and it really does change you. So in these different traditions, that's kind of what can happen. So there's a lot more alike than not. Okay, they may appear to be different, but they're more alike.
I would imagine it's like each one taking you like into deeper levels.
Yeah, and their own special gifts.
Yeah.
See, well, the Abrahamic energy of the spiritual warrior, okay, and then Lakshmi comes and totally permeates me, literally merges with me physically, and giving me the feminine gifts of spiritual wealth. She's the goddess of wealth, but spiritual wealth and physical wealth. But literally transferring energy into me, like Abraham did, and like Sai Baba of Shirdi, when he materialized, literally, with witnesses in front of me and gave me a shocked about the transmission of energy, and literally knocked me over. And these really happen. These people come, these beings come on the astral plane, and they materialize. And it's happened in all three traditions. Kind of one of them, so these are things that begin to happen when you penetrated pretty deeply into it. You have to kind of go with abandon. You can't go with, I think it's a little dangerous. And no, you have to jump in.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty key, and that's my style. I'm going to jump in.
Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is holistic physician, psychiatrist, family therapist, rabbi, yogi, spiritual mystic, humanitarian, peace ambassador, and author of several best-selling books, Gabriel Cousens MD. And we're talking about his latest book, Into the Nothing, a spiritual autobiography in which he shares details of the 10 lives he's packed into this life, which led to his emergence as a liberated and enlightened master. We'll be back with more from Dr. Gabriel Cousens after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
Mental health. Most people think it means mental illness. Most people are wrong. Mental health doesn't apply to just some of us. It applies to everyone. We're all susceptible to anxiety and depression. They're human conditions. And no person should ever feel embarrassed, ashamed, or be discriminated against for being human. Cracked the podcast strips away the shame, fear, and stigma by expanding the conversation into areas less often visited. From brain and body chemistry, hormones, food, nutrition, trauma, and the microbiome, to pharmaceutical drugs, psychedelic substances, meditation, visionary experiences, and spiritual awakenings. Cracked the podcast will explore them all, including the notion that, for many, breakdown can be the beginning of breakthrough. For in the words of singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in. Cracked the podcast, slaying the dragons of mental health. Join co-hosts Sandie Sedgbeer and Rebecca Shaper on the first and third Thursday of every month at 12 noon Eastern Time.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Welcome back. Dr. Gabriel Cousens, your mission is to bring the holistic liberation way to anyone who wishes to experience this freedom for themselves. Tell me about the holistic liberation way and the unique teachings that it encompasses.
So I'm going to tell you a little story and you'll get a feeling for it. So I do a lot of humanitarian work, as I mentioned, and part of the holistic liberation way is at least an 80% live food, 100% vegan diet. So I'm in Africa and I'm teaching, and I'm in Cameroon, and we have literally got 60 organic, veganic farms now that are happening where the people are being fed with really good, healthy food. That's kind of the teaching, at that level. Now, in Nigeria, I was working, am working with the local king in a place called Wari, and I noticed all these Stars of David. I said, what is this? And he said, well, we're one of the lost tribes. And I explained that I was a rabbi and a teacher. So we set up a shamanic Shabbat for the 13 tribes that he was, in a sense, and the whole region. So all people from all 13 tribes came. At night, we did a real Shabbat, and I was able to transfer the energy to them. So it's like when you're out in service, you don't know the level of what's going to show up. But the point I'm making is people were able to reconnect with their lost tribe tradition. A lot of people got awakening of the Kundalini. The king's father was 111 years old. 3 days later, was still flying high from the Shaktipat experience. So that's one way it happens is you're living it, and it happens wherever you are, rather than, let's say, limited to, okay, we're going to sit and meditate in our meditation room. So the point I'm making is you're being lived by it. Key. There isn't a practice. You're living by it, and each person weaves it in a way that works. So I talk about the food part. The second part is the breathing and the dance of the divine. So I love to do sacred dance and go dance pretty wildly with it. Spirit dance, ghost dance, sun dance. And then third is service and charity. And I just gave you an example of how the lifestyle, I was being lived by it. So wherever I am, that's what's being expressed. And people get it, And so we have a shamanic Shabbat for a lost tribe. It's like, whoa. Fourth is being humble enough to work with a teacher, a spiritual teacher. I had two. Actually, it's a great blessing, and be able to know about surrender as part of that whole training. And the fifth is meditating as a way of life. For me, I still meditate. I love it. It's my food. Okay, so meditating 1 hour twice a day, and again sharing the meditation. We just did Peace 21, which is a meditation on equinox and solstice to create peace in the world. We just did that yesterday, on the 21st of June. And then the final is as much Shaktipat, or what we call Haniha in the Torah tradition, as possible. Now, in this case, I'm the one that's being the vehicle for that. But when I was with Muktananda, and I was there up to the very day, I left the day before he died, and he left his body. But it didn't matter where I was. I would make sure I got there for the evening program to receive the Shakti. So it's learning to constantly be generating those energies and associating with those energies and finding people who are willing to be motivated by that way. So there's a collective. I'm kind of more of an individual. To do what I do, you have to kind of be able to stand on your own, so pretty clearly. But at the same time, we're part of a whole. So all these get played out in the holistic way of life. And that's what I call it the holistic way of liberation. It isn't just meditate, or it isn't just do service and charity, or you can't eat your way to God. They're all part of a weave of a multi-dimensional level. Now, there's another layer to that. In the Torah tradition, there's 5 levels of soul. And it's developing each of those levels as part of your lifestyle. So the nefesh is the physical energy that you got, or God breathed in the atom, that story, became alive. And then there's the astral plane part of it. You're dealing with angels and demons, but you're open to that plane and you're growing in that way, and you learn not to get trapped in it. That's a big test. The whole world, one of the key things about this path of holistic liberation is everything in the world is a test for you. Everything that happens to you is a test, if you see it that way. You could say, poor me, or you could say, okay, this is obviously a challenge, and how is it challenging me? How can I grow from it and be open to it? So it's that attitude in no matter what. So we have the astral plane experiences, as I explained with Lakshmi and Abraham and Saibala Shirdi and a lot of other ones, and learning to work with angels and demons along the way. I'm a family person. My daughter is 5 years old, and we're in the ashram in India, and she starts crying every time we go by a field. I go to look down at what's going on. He says, there's a demon in the field. Oh, and I want you to deal with it. Me? That's the way it is. And so, okay, I have to be open to the astral plane, and he teaches me how to deal with demons, and I go and banish the demon. Now, that sounds ridiculous for most people, but actually, it happens all the time. In our world, and I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I learned about how to do that, and I also basically saved my daughter. It stopped. Everything stopped. She no longer had these strange things. So the family relationship is really important. Sacred relationship, in my world, I define as a spiritual path. And that the advantage, this is more Western thinking, but not that there aren't Eastern gurus who are married, but the Western that's more primary, is that the interaction of the two has the potential to bring out the best in you if you see that sacred relationships is indeed a spiritual path, and whatever difficulties are coming up, they become a way up to grow spiritually. So that's also part of it, because everything is an opportunity to grow, and relationship is often a very intense way to do. So I do a lot of teaching on sacred relationship because it's so powerful. And then obviously we're talking about, meditating is part of it. We're also talking about working community service. We're also talking about what the Native American says is Tachyon, and the holistic way is to understand everyone's your relation. The living planet is your relation. And that's a basis for really ecological thinking. I'm not doing it, it's part of me. So of course I want to take care of it. And then we have from that, the spiritual ecology, but multiple cultures, the plant world, the animal world, and the human world, and the other levels. And that's just part of your life. You're open to all of those levels of understanding, levels of the soul. So the third level is neshama, which is your individual soul as it really connects to the divine. And then high is where we're connected to all the souls in the world. That's a motivation for wanting to uplift humanity and feeling that connection. The point is to feel it. And finding a heat is the direct, hardcore connection to God. So all 5 levels in this holistic liberation way all need to be developed. Not just the intellect, okay, which is the neshama, or not just the emotions, which is the ra. So I'm kind of saying a bigger picture where we're developing all 5 levels of our soul, merging into the one and ultimately going beyond the one into nothing, where there's no you left. The Torah teaching is you can't know God and live. It took me years to figure out what that meant, but it's exactly what I'm saying, is that ultimately when you disappear into nothing, you disappear. And there's only the nothing. There's no I-ness left. So this is a whole lifestyle on a physical, emotional, mental, individual soul level, and then oversoul, and then the nothing. So that's how it works. It's every aspect of our life. That's what I talk about. Liberation of every aspect.
As a 20-year-old footballer, you were doing 70 push-ups and 7 pull-ups a day. Today, you're 77, and you're doing
78.
Okay, 78 now. 1,000 push-ups and 80 pull-ups.
Well, actually, I hit 1,550 yesterday.
How do you do it? Is this a culmination of, all of the things that you have been practicing, the meditation, the discipline, the rainbow diet?
Yes. The answer is yes. It is. Your questions are really good. It is exactly that. And it's a little bit mind over matter. So 2 times a week. Well, now I'm hitting 1,550 like 3 times a week. It's just a way of testing myself. I don't compete with anybody. I compete with myself, so to speak. And one of my messages is, here we are at 78, can sit in full lotus for extended periods of time, I'm doing yoga 6 times a week. We can get better with age. We can get stronger. We can get more flexible. And we can also have a lot more fun because we have a little more wisdom behind it. So it is a message, too, that everything in life can be used to elevate you spiritually. And chronological age is part of it. It's a challenge. Maybe you have to work a little harder. Okay, no big deal for me. So it's kind of an attitude. Okay, I got chronological years of 78 years, and so I'm going to increase push-ups, and I'm going to increase pull-ups, and I'm going to... It's a way of saying everything in life becomes an opportunity to go spiritually. That's really what you're hearing from me. And spiritual joy. Spiritual joy is what connects us to the divine. In the Torah tradition, it's like dancing, singing. It's like it helps open up the doors of our heart and mind to the divine.
Well, one thing that's never far from your mind is world peace. I mean, you've been leading prayer ceremonies for peace since 1965 around the world, and activating meditations on the solstice and the equinox since the 80s. In the light of what's happening in so many regions of the world right now, do you feel that we are moving further away from that ideal of world peace?
You asked really good questions, okay? So the answer is no. The answer is we're getting closer and closer to a paradigm shift of how we experience the world. Generally, we think in the tree of good and evil. We'll do good things. We'll change the darkness. That works to a certain extent, but there's a paradigm shift that also says, let's step out of that dualistic view and understand that our shift is to see the oneness in all creation and shift our consciousness to be open to seeing the dance of the divine in everything, even though certain things are going on that we don't like. I think the crisis that the world is in has the potential to wake up the world. And I believe that's happening more and more. And so And for some people, they don't do so well. I call it a crisis of desperation. And one of the things I do is try to help people wake up from the illusion of desperation and understand this is a spiritual test. Take advantage of it. So I'm kind of using the world events to help people wake up. Like yesterday, I was starting to teach at the Reedman Naturopathic School in Tel Aviv, and it's my first day there was yesterday. And I said, we're going to do a Peace 21 meditation because it's the 21st. I mean, I did this a few days in advance. So we had about 350 people at the Reedman School who did a peace meditation. They hadn't done that before. And it's like, so it integrates in. People are ready for it, is what I'm saying. It's just that, it's too easy to get caught in, using the term like Maya, that kind of, the duality world, rather than saying, no, let's right in it. Let's see the oneness of it. Let's focus on that, and let's have a paradigm shift in our perspective. So I am optimist that we will get through, maybe take another year, and then kind of break through on the other side of things. I'm avoiding some of the medical issues that are out there, but I'm talking about all this is forcing people to wake up and pay attention.
Yeah.
And that is very good. Now, are there people willing to step forward? Well, that's what I'm doing here. We had this worldwide peace meditation with thousands of numbers of people involved. People are hungry for, I'm not calling an answer, because I'm not trying to be an answer for people, but they're hungry for seeing the oneness. Like, I got to feel something bigger than what we're seeing here, and that's how people are feeling. So I'm kind of very optimistic, and we're focusing very much on the meditation, which is nice that I could walk into this naturopathic school, which may be the best one in the world, and now I'm a senior consultant there, and day one, we're doing a meditation. And people are open to it. That's how I see it.
Well, you're 78. You're a world-renowned holistic physician. You're a rabbi, a yogi, spiritual mystic. I mean, you've best-selling author. You've done so many things. Many might say, that's enough for one lifetime. That's enough for 10 lifetimes. But it's not enough for you, is it? It's not.
No.
No. I
don't see it as doership. I just love doing it. I really just have a good time. I do what, I act out of spiritual joy to increase the spiritual joy. I don't think about it like, this is kind of hard because I have to do the Sundance. No, I go for it because it's a sense of aliveness that's there for me that happens. Not that I don't feel internally alive, but the outer play is a way of expressing that aliveness. So I don't think about it as accomplishment. I think I'm just, whatever's happening, I'm going for it, and how can I relate to it at the highest octave of consciousness?
So do you feel that, you wanted to know God? Do you feel that you know God, that you found the truth that you were looking for, that there isn't really much else to know, but what you want is to let everybody else know what you know?
Well, again, you're asking a good question. So do we truly know God all the time? To me, being liberated doesn't mean you know God all the time. You know it most of the time. Okay, that's an important little point I want to make. And for most of the time, you want all of the time. That's very rare in the different traditions. It's very rare to have a God merge being. And that's not a goal, but I'm not putting any holds thinking, well, I've attained, that's it. I just don't think that way. It's like there's a very famous rabbi, 1802. He said, you make one step and then you're a beginner again. So I kind of take that attitude. This is Rabbi Nachman. It's like fine, I'm beginning again. Oh, and I'm beginning again. And so you're always young. You've never, in a sense, in your mind arrived, even though your consciousness keeps getting more and more expanded. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does.
So
It does.
I'm not ending. I'm not ending. I don't even think that way.
No. Well, I can imagine that, anyone reading your book, anyone listening to what you've said here today, must be, feeling a bit like Meg Ryan in that movie where it's, I want what he's got. And how can people get it? Tell us how they can explore the holistic liberation way with you.
Good. It's again, great question. So people can find me at drcousens.com, and that directs you to all the things. I have a weekly teaching that I do on Thursdays, Alive and Liberated with Dr. Gabriel. I have certain longer teachings that I do because I'm teaching all over the world. So in the Portuguese and the Spanish and so forth. So that's another way. I do regular kind of teachings after Shabbat. So, and then they can go to the Tree of Life community.mn.co, and all my teachings are there. All my, everything's recorded, and that's there. And then the other thing is each month I do a holistic meditation retreat. We meditate 3 times a day. We start Friday night and then 3 times on Saturday, 3 times on Sunday, so they can have a direct experience. And that's really important to people because it's one thing to hear about, it's another thing to have the direct experience. And I'm obviously a direct experience person,
Yeah.
And so I encourage people to come to the meditation retreat because people get a direct experience of the Shaktipat meditation. And about 80-90% of the people, maybe 90% of the people, have the Kundalini awakened. And if it's already awakened, it gets amplified for them. So given our context today, which is mostly over the internet, so I have once a month we're doing this. There are other ceremonies that are going on. They could get going into treeoflifecommunity.mn.co for the whole schedule. Every Thursday I'm giving a teaching and a meditation, Shaktipat meditation experience. So there's lots of ways to reach me and to tune into this bigger picture of all the teachings. I have probably 350 tapes, videos that are already out there.
Well, very quickly before we have to finish, I mean, the book is quite long. It's very deep. It's very engaging. I mean, it's absolutely jam-packed. When you were writing that book, what were you thinking and feeling looking back over your life?
What was I thinking of? Say it again, I didn't quite hear it.
What were you thinking and feeling as you were writing the book and remembering all the things that you've done?
It's an interesting question because it's easy to get caught in the past. But for me, my attitude is, hey, I'm just beginning here. And so I'm writing down the beginning. I'm serious, actually, if you get what I'm saying. Okay, let's do it. I need to be out there teaching to people. I'm 78 years old. I need to be sharing. Well, this came out when I was 77, but I need to be sharing and teaching because it's what I should be doing. So I see the book as actually a service. It's not for everybody because you have to have some intent on spiritual life. And then it's a service supporting that intent and giving some openings for where I can continue to work with people who are interested in that level. So I saw writing the book honestly as a service. And I kind of had fun doing it. It was kind of fun to remember all these things and, conceptualize it. And so I wrote it as a way of people having the experience of my life rather than learning about somebody. So there's a lot of Shaktipat kind of pictures in there. And that's it. In another while, I'll write another book, the next phase. But I feel psychically, in this cycle of time, I needed to kind of complete it. So the book was a sense, for me, also of a completion of a certain phase. So those are kind of what I'm saying on my service, completion of a phase. I never, ever expected to write any books. It's not totally easy to write books. And so it was a spiritual experience to go through all those experiences again to be able to write them.
I'm sure.
Right? All those things.
Dr. Gabriel Cousens, thank you so much for joining us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and the book, and thank you.
Sandie, thank you for the great interview, for the work you're doing.
You're welcome. Into the Nothing, a spiritual autobiography by Gabriel Cousens, is published by Infinite Light Publishing. Don't forget you can check out everything to do with his work, his webcasts, online programs at treeoflifecenterus.com, treeoflifefoundation.org and gabrielcousens.com. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back again at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. I'll talk to you then.